it would also be politically talented for her to understand where the hell she is, which is in New Hampshire, which is part of the Union, and where she is vying not for Trump's devoted base, but where she is vying for the votes of soft GOP, right-leaning independents, and Indy independents, New Hampshire independents, because those are the people that are making up her margins right now in New Hampshire, which is the one state that she has to win or come in a very close second to have any path to the nomination.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Secret Podcast, a special bonus edition we didn't expect to do, an emergency secret podcast. I'm Tim Miller, in for JVL with Sarah Longwell. Sarah, how was the Christmas holiday for you?
It was good. It was all right. I think we can banter about Christmas at the back end. You know, JVL and I learned a long time ago that you save the banter for the back.
Okay.
You go right into the politics, which is why I convened this extra special secret podcast, because I got too many Nikki Haley takes to sit on.
No banter. You have Nikki Haley takes to sit on, and the people from my threads and Twitter comment section are interested to hear Sarah Longwell's take on Nikki Haley. I received several apps. Sarah Longwell, hardest hit.
I got some of those too.
And so, given that you were the one that was hardest hit, well, actually, let me just, for people who have missed it, people who have better things to do over the holiday, let me explain what happened, and then Sarah will have you give your initial takes. Last night in New Hampshire, Berlin, New Hampshire, they pronounce it Berlin, not Berlin. Someone who's done several New Hampshire primaries, I've got that down. Just a flinty New Englander with the accent, I'm not going to do the accent, asked Nikki Haley a simple question. What was the cause of the United States Civil War? Haley begins deflecting with a little joke and says, well, don't come with an easy question or anything. And then she says, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms, and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? You know, classic town hall move there to stall, push back at the questioner.
And he correctly responded, I'm not running for president.
I wanted to hear your view. And then he does not let her off the hook. I mean, he just goes right back at her. I want to hear your view. Haley, I think it always comes down to the role of government. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so individuals have liberties, so that they have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way. Back to the fella, thank you. In the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you'd answer that question without mentioning the word slavery. Nikki, what do you want me to say about slavery? Next question. Womp womp. It's kind of a Miss South Carolina redux
Big
for
yikes.
those elder millennials. Sarah, take the floor.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with the fact that Nikki Haley just could have had, this is an easy question, right? So some people are like, well, this is a gotcha question. It's only a gotcha question in the sense that this human asking the question clearly understands that he wants to know where this Republican candidate sits on the question of discussing slavery, which is only germane because the Republican Party, in a Republican primary, it is now not an easy thing to answer a forthright question on slavery, because you may have to say something like the South was in the wrong, or, keeping human beings as chattel was a dark time in America's past that now has some, some systemic, what would it be, aftershocks that run through
You're starting to sound woke. There's systemic problems.
Well, that's the
now.
problem,
Yeah.
right? Is that like she doesn't want to go down that path, right? So she views it as a gotcha question, when of course there are a bunch of easy ways to answer this question, because it's an easy question. Yes. One is you just do what the thing. Did you ever see that thing on The Simpsons where Apu is taking his citizenship test, and he gets asked what was the cause of the Civil War, and he goes into the sort of the big, broad geopolitical thing, and the guy doing the interview is just like, just say slavery. He's like, yes, slavery, right? And
approved, Apu,
right?
you're a citizen.
If she just said slavery, one word answer, next question, would have counted, would have worked. Or if she had said, I'm so glad you asked, because let me tell you who a great Republican was. A man named Abraham Lincoln, who won the Civil War and who started the Republican Party, which was started in part out of the abolitionist movement. Like, there's a million ways to answer this question well, and even in ways that, like, lionize the Republican Party, make her look smart. But she is so afraid of the Republican base, so afraid, because she's from South Carolina, so she knows there's a contingent that does not want to hear that slavery was bad and a moral evil. And so she dodges and obfuscates. Also, in her word salad, there are a great many things to pick apart. I love when she just says, I like capitalism.
I like capitalism.
Sure.
That's safe.
Are we, is in the context of the question, what's the capitalism we like here? Is it the buying and selling of humans? Because we don't like that capitalism, Nikki. And is the government interference you're talking about, is that the people who were intervening on behalf of slaves? Or when she was talking about people should be free, did she mean that slavery was a moral ill? Couldn't tell. Could you tell?
Yeah, or the anti-capitalists in this case, the pre-Civil War South. Okay, because you don't hear that. That could almost sound like a woke criticism now. All of a sudden, it's hard to say like where her capitalism was. It's funny. As I was listening to you talk, there was a third answer she could have given actually. That she shied away from. And I think that also speaks to the state of the Republican Party, because it's similar to how Donald Trump can't talk about the best thing that he did when he was president, the vaccine.
The vaccine, yeah.
Nikki Haley can't talk about the best thing she did when she was governor, which was move the Confederate flag. And she doesn't, I went to see several of her events. Every once in a while it will come up and she'll kind of like downplay it and talk about it more like how, how she navigated a crisis, really, more than like the moral, that there was a moral imperative to do this.
Because it was after a shooting.
Yeah, it was after the Dylan Roof shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah, at
a black church.
At the black church, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she could say that. She could even start this question with, a joke, maybe in New Hampshire. This question might seem a little more cut and dry. Down in South Carolina, there are a lot of people with strong feelings about this, and I've had to navigate that, right? And after this shooting, we had a big debate over the Confederate flag, and that's all related to, what the root causes were of the Civil War, and whether there was any value in our heritage. And I did have to navigate that. And I understand that there are people with strong feelings, but like the reality is, looking back, like slavery was a crucial part, you know what I mean? And that's why I took this flag down, and I showed that I could unite the state, and we can still respect the culture of our state without offending people, right? Like you could go with a real kind of softy, compassionate, conservative kind of old school answer, right? I just the idea that doesn't even cross her mind.
Well, that's not even an old school answer.
Speaks to the state of the party, yeah.
But that's not even an old school answer. That is a Nikki specific leadership answer where she could have talked about it as a human, right? And that would take something that has just been totally absent in this Republican primary, which is political talent, right? A politically talented person who's capable of being a human and having political positions would be able to mine their personal experience to uncover the complicated role of somebody in politics and how they've navigated it in the past to their benefit and to end up in the morally correct place. It would also be politically talented for her to understand where the hell she is, which is in New Hampshire, which is part of the Union, and where she is vying not for Trump's devoted base, but where she is vying for the votes of soft GOP, right-leaning independents, and Indy independents, New Hampshire independents, because those are the people that are making up her margins right now in New Hampshire, which is the one state that she has to win or come in a very close second to have any path to the nomination. Yeah. So why, Tim, I got to know, because this is genuinely, I don't understand it. Why is she, in that moment, why is she playing to the Trump base? Like the Trump people have a comfortable racist that they can go to when they want a non-answer about slavery. Nikki needs the other people. So what is she doing?
I mean, even Trump might say the answer to that question is slavery. I think about the old meme, the meme where it's like the bell curve of people's intelligence, and it's like the stupidest people answer that question, slavery, and the smartest people answer that question, slavery, and then it's the people in the middle band that are like, well, there are economic conditions in states. Anyway, here's what I think. I actually think that this is more deep-seated than that, and it's trauma from South Carolina, and she's been around a lot of people for whom this is very sensitive, and
Right.
maybe if she came from a different place, it wasn't. Did you see this going around? This is not the first time she's botched
Her
this question.
2010 answer.
Yeah, in 2010, she somehow
wild.
managed to give an even worse answer on it was like a Patriots YouTube page when she was running for governor, and this was around the same time as the flag incident, and I'm not going to read the whole answer this time, but. She ends up saying that the problem was that there was a question of tradition versus change. I think on the one side of the Civil War that was fighting for tradition, and another side that was fighting for change. And at the end of the day, what I think we need to remember is that everyone is supposed to have their rights. And then she says, I don't think anybody did anything out of hate. I think that you saw passions on different sides. This was her answer in 2010. And it's like, oh yeah, the slave owners whipping their, the subhumans that they kept as their property didn't do anything out of hate. Like, the whole thing is just preposterous. And here she is a decade and a half later, still unable to answer this basic question. And I do think that it's a politician's impulse to feel like, man, I know, like, in her head, rather than think, oh man, these independents in New Hampshire and these moderate R's or these Chamber of Commerce R's, that to the extent that they remain, that I'm going to need to do well in this New Hampshire primary, they're going to be mad if I don't just say the truth about what happened in the Civil War. They're okay with a little bit of wokeness, if it's woke to say that slavery caused the Civil War. Not exactly Howard Zinn type material there, but instead in her head it's like, oh no, those guys that shouted at me in South Carolina at town halls for 10 years, they're going to be mad at me if I sound too much like a Yankee right now giving this answer. And I do think that it's probably that. Like, I can't fully get inside her brain, but it's the fact that she hasn't been able to come up with an answer for this in 13 years tells me that at some level she knows that there's a contingency in South Carolina that she needs, that is the heritage not hate crowd, and she didn't want to turn them off. And she didn't have herself in New Hampshire brain. She doesn't have herself in New Hampshire brain. She doesn't. This is also, and this is where I go back to you. I also don't think she has a strategy for winning this primary.
Right.
This is another part of the thing. Like, it's not like if it was John Huntsman in our campaign or Kasich, people, like, we recognized we had a New Hampshire strategy, and so the candidate is a little bit freed to go in there and speak New Hampshire. Like, I'm going to give you real talk. I'm going to be heterodox at times because that's what it's okay here. She doesn't have in her head a New Hampshire strategy. She still has like a miracle lightning bolt hits Donald Trump and she's the next person remaining strategy.
I think that is 100% true. Yeah. And just to answer, so I think it's fair, the people who are like Sarah Longwell hardest hit, because like I am hard hit by these when they happen, because
there are no normal Republicans, Sarah. When will you get it through your head, Sarah?
I know. But the thing is okay, this is an easy one to answer, because there's some people on the Twitters when I was like, oh my, I was expressing my dismay at this, and they're like, still want her to win, Sarah? And I'm like, yeah, actually, yes. Like, in my fantasy world, do I want Nikki Haley to win over Donald Trump? Yeah. I don't, like, the guy who did the coup, I do. That is different from being like, Nikki Haley, net positive human. Like, I mean, you can look at this, and I don't know if you've been listening to this podcast, there is one major theme running through it, which is
Orange Man bad.
No. Which is that the Republican Party is in really bad shape. We were all part of it. We understand it. And we have watched, I listen to Republican voters all the time. I talk to you guys about it. Nobody is under any illusions about what bad shape the Republican Party is in. how morally sort of bankrupt the base is that wants Donald Trump. And we try to explain sort of what's going on. But Donald Trump is a unique threat. Nikki Haley is a cipher, like a windsock, for which way the Republican Party's winds are blowing. She is preferable to the worst politician in our lifetimes.
Human.
Right? And
America's worst human. She's
yes.
preferable to America's worst human.
So that is not that's not my raging endorsement of Nikki Haley, but would it absolutely be better if she were the nominee? 100%. Right?
Yeah, and I'm sure Ed Frum is out there getting killed on this morning too, where he's like did
know.
a tweet that he's like, dunk on me if you want, but Nikki Haley would be way better than Trump. And it's like, yeah, I do think that sometimes our listeners, particularly, we have some Never Trump listeners, but we also have some very progressive listeners who like mishear, right? And they're like, they hear us rooting for Nikki Haley, and they're like, oh man, these guys are going back. These guys are going back. And like what they're instead they're mishearing no. I've reflected on the fundamental flaws that are happening in the party. Like, this is an ongoing therapy session that we have every week about what happened to the Republican Party. And I'm not going back, and I'm going to vote for Joe Biden no matter who the Republicans nominate. But, like, for the country, for the democracy, for the state of my mental health, for everything, like, having somebody, like nobody's going to be waving Nikki Haley flags charging the Capitol, spearing cops. Like, that's not going to happen. She doesn't elicit that kind of support. Is not that level of a liar and a narcissistic sociopath. So she's preferable. And my question back to you, Sarah, is like, I mean, do you feel like when you see things like this, because you vacillate a little bit with, oh, I hear Nikki Haley say things, and it's like, oh, I remember the good parts, and then you hear this, and you're like, oh, right, there's the fundamental bad parts. I mean, like, how do you?
So I think that. So I recognize, and I think you can relate to this as a John McCain person, and even as somebody who worked for Mitt Romney. And maybe it's the gay part of us, but we developed, I think, in our younger ages, an ear for somebody who didn't quite mean it. Right?
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Maybe
I wrote about this.
But other people listening might not really know what we mean. But let me just tell you that we would look at John McCain or George W. Bush, especially on like gay stuff or other things, and we'd be like, okay, yeah, I know that they say that, but we know they're saying it to win a Republican primary, and they don't actually mean it. Yeah. And I think in our younger days, we felt like that was an act of political sophistication, right? And like, as we've gotten older, and I think Trump just really has kind of cracked open this particular space, which is, actually saying things that are wrong in order to get elected in a Republican primary, but that you don't actually do. Like, because here's like, so take Nikki Haley's, so that word salad that she gave from 10 years ago. So she gave that to get elected. And then in office, she took down the Confederate flag, right? Yeah. And I think that this is what we think of when we think of these politicians. We think in this way of, you got to get through this Republican primary, and then you're going to go and actually you're going to move things in a decent direction. On social issues, like we knew the Bushes were more liberal, right? We knew John McCain was more liberal, but we also knew he couldn't like come out for gay marriage like his wife did and win a Republican primary. And so I think we carried that calculation pretty deep for a long time in a way that now I think that you cannot placate voters like this, like that they're, and I think that's actually some of the antis really still carry this deeply in a way that we hate because we know exactly what it is, right? We're like, you cannot justify this any longer. This isn't like some obfuscation. This isn't like Mitt Romney being for gay marriage and then not for gay marriage to get elected and whatever. We can no longer, like, they are not good on the other side of it, or at least Trump is not, right? Like, Trump's not saying this to get elected. Like, Trump's going to be this person the whole time, and also we're done with this mental calculation.
Right. And I think it's what makes us even more mad. That's why we did the emergency secret, right? Because it's like, we've seen the negative consequences of this. Right. Like, it might have been defensible, it might not have been defensible. We can all, everyone listening can judge our choices in 2011, right? But, like, it was at least it was at least a gray area then. And now you look back on that and you're like, oh man, look, like enabling this racism and enabling this conspiracy mongering within the Republican base, like we've seen the Frankenstein monster it creates. And so like, how can you keep doing that in good conscience? Anyway, I've got an interesting side point before we get off this. Did you see what the DeSantis War Room put out on this?
They criticized her.
Yes.
And said about not saying slavery.
Yeah. And then they just posted 6 minutes ago again. It's been 12 hours and Nikki Haley still hasn't offered an explanation for her comments. What's the holdup? What's happening over there in DeSantis?
Ron DeSantis, new normie. He's running to Nikki's. I wanted to say left, but I just mean sane. Like whatever the spectrum is of more like up or down, not left and right. Yeah, I mean, look, he's just looking for any reason to hit Nikki. So I guess that's what this is about. Maybe they have finally realized that their strategy of trying to out-Trump Trump and wrestle away MAGA voters was the wrong strategy now that everybody thinks Ron DeSantis should basically drop out before Iowa.
Or maybe he's just trying to muddy the waters with his history curriculum of talking about the benefits of slavery. It's like, yes, Nikki Haley, slavery caused the Civil War, and it was good. Anyway, and there were
because
some
everybody
benefits.
got all those skills, skills that the workers got. Honestly, I mean, but like, can it just because people are going to be not like my rant on us when we were like in our 20s or whatever, and you got to understand that like Republicans today are saying way more insane things than they were 20 years ago or 15 years ago. Like, forget nobody was saying slavery might have had some upsides. Like the Republicans talked about the environment, like the presidential candidates. It was not this.